There's a place in the woods called Aspen Ridge, and this is where we call home. We're the Popple People. Welcome to our channel. Thanks for stopping by. Well, Tater's still busy working on her 1998 Dodge Ram plow truck that came from Arizona. It's got a bit of a wobble in the front end occasionally, like when you drive over bumps going about 30 or 40 miles an hour. This is a somewhat common problem with these second-generation Dodge pickups, and it's referred to as the death wobble. So today, Tater's installing a stabilizer to support the steering gearbox, since there have been issues with the gearbox flexing where it mounts to the frame, and when the steering box flexes, the front end wobbles, causing the steering wheel to shake pretty violently. So this should fix that. Just trying to be proactive here and install this before that dreaded death wobble occurs. Tater found this particular one for about $50 US online. Even though our walks are getting a bit slower every day, the Popple Pup still likes to visit the shop and supervise.
Hi, welcome back to the Popple People channel. If you're new here, welcome. If you're not new, welcome back. And we're going to install a steering stabilizer on these second generation Dodge pickups. They had a problem with steering wobble. Probably like around 30 to 50 miles an hour where the wheel would shake violently. I didn't notice any issues too bad with it. I mean, once in a while it would wobble a little bit, but we're hoping to take care of that issue with a steering stabilizer. And what it does is it basically stabilizes the sector shaft on the steering gear itself, because apparently second generation Dodge pickups, where the steering box mounts, it flexes a little bit, and that's what causes some of your wobble. Other than steering or suspension components could also be wore out, that could also contribute to it, but everything's real tight on this truck. I will show you the parts next. So here's the stabilizer, and this attaches to where your sway bar mounts or bushings are on the front, and then this part here goes through where the steering shaft sector is. You take the nut off and you replace it with this nut shaft assembly, and that goes right here, which this bearing, which fits underneath, goes on, and then this fits inside of there like that. So you'll see how that goes together when we put it together. And then we have the two bolts and nuts to attach the bearing, and then we have 4 bolts there to replace on each side here, the sway bar bolts, because this is probably about a 1/4 inch thick, so you have to have a little bit longer bolt. So there's all the parts, and here's the instructions. So we are going to start underneath by the first thing it says here to do is to remove the pitman arm, nut, and lock washer. So we're going to do that first. So I'm going to remove this nut off the pitman arm. Well, that came off nice. Guess that's the advantage of having a truck from down south. So we're going to discard this lock washer and nut, and we're going to install the new lock washer and then this nut with the shaft on it onto there. Okay, get that started by hand. Instructions, it says to torque this bolt to 185 foot-pounds. This is 1.25 inch socket. Fits this on this particular steering shaft stabilizer kit. Get that tight. Torque wrench set to 185, and torque this down. There we go. That was a lot of work. Okay, remove the sway bar bolts. So we have one here and one here. Take those out, and then we'll do the other side. Get them loose to begin with. Now it says to support this. Well, I'm not going to put any support on it right now, but be careful it doesn't hit you in the head. take this last one, it's going to drop down. Okay, just let that go right down like that. Okay, so we set this up, and then with the help of an assistant, you gotta put it in the, so the shaft goes in there. Now I'm gonna, watch your fingers. There it goes like that. Oh, this is heavy. Okay. And we're gonna just keep these loose. We wanna tighten them. Right. Keep them fairly loose. So we're getting this up in there. You start these bolts by hand. It's really important so you don't cross thread them. And we don't want to tighten these up. We just want to get them started, keep them loose. And we're going to just keep these loose. Oh, that's too tight. Not so it can go back and forth. All right. Okay, you want this thing loosened here like this, not tight, because we got to center this bearing on this now and tighten this first. So that'll be next, so we'll get the bearing. It doesn't say this in the directions, but I'm going to put a little anti-seize on here because if I have to replace this bearing ever, hopefully this will just come right off. I take it apart. Well, we will see. Time will tell on that one. So I want to put the bearing on so the grease fittings, so you can access it. I'm going to slide that on there. Hold it with the fingers. I'm going to get one of the bolts started. And then a washer. And then these are lock nuts. And go over to the other side. The same. Bolt 2. Washer. And a lock nut. And here it says, once that's installed, tighten to 60 foot-pounds. So first we're going to use a regular ratchet and snug those all up. Okay, and got the torque wrench set, 60 foot-pounds. Okay, wow. I think I'll just this one up against there. Okay. Now the next thing it says is to tighten the sway bar bushings. So we're going to zip them up and then torque them to 35 foot-pounds. Now we'll torque them to 35 foot-pounds. That's done. The next thing we have to do is tighten these set screws up. Looks like there's two set screws on the bearing here. So after I finish tightening the sway bar up, now all these set screws here, it looks like it's about 1/8 inch. You gotta tighten these up. Hand tight. Okay. Now the last thing I have to do is grease it and then check it out. So if you look at this whole thing, you can see how this is supporting, if you look up the steering gearbox above, how it's supporting that whole sector shaft. And that's supposed to help prevent some of that wobble, or they deem it as death wobble. So let's hope this takes care of our issues. Okay, now I'm going to grease this. This is the last part of the job. And like everything else, we need to make sure that you keep greasing this when you like change oil or maintain anything else. So I'm going to fill this up slowly. It starts coming out all the sides. Just kind of leave that on there like that. That looks pretty good. Okay, and that's it. Now I just got to go test drive it. Little cap right here, pretty important, because if this gets full of rust and stuff, you're not going to be able to lube it. You'll have to replace the grease zerk. But we'll just take some of that leftover grease and kind of run it around here to protect the whole thing.
Wow, that turned out great. Now, the question is, does it work? Did it fix the steering wobble? If you've got questions or comments, please email us at thepopplepeople, all one word, @gmail.com. Or you can flip-flop a comment below. We love hearing from you.
Now it seems to handle much better. Especially when you go over a bump, is when you usually have that wobble and the steering wheel would go back and forth. It's a pretty bumpy road I'm going on here. It seems to be a lot better as far as handling. And before you'd go over a bump and the whole wheel would be shaky like this. Now it's pretty good.
Thank you so much for watching. We really appreciate it. If you liked this video, please hit that thumbs up button below, and please consider subscribing. That way, you can be a Popple People too. We'll see you soon.